Welcome to another episode of the Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures.
You want to click us live? Not there
I
yet.
yep, we're up there. We're all good. Just takes a second to catch up, but um, so this is episode. What did I say it was, Ben? Episode 66.
66.
Episode 66, and tonight we're going to be chatting about what to do if you find yourself lost in the woods. It's one of those things we hope it never happens, but the reality is with our hobby, if you will. There is always that slight chance that you could get turned around, and honestly, it can happen to the best of people. There's some things you can do to prepare for it. There's some things you can do once you realize it, and then there's some things you can do once you're kind of to that realization to all assist you in giving you the best possible chances of being found. Now, this is kind of I don't want to say your area of expertise, but kind of your area of expertise, would it not be, Ben?
Uh, Area of finding lost people, yes.
So I so Ben being on the ground search and rescue, this is something that I'm hoping he can straighten out some of the common myths and stuff like that you always hear about in the woods, uh, and honestly, he can probably back up most of what we're going to talk about here tonight because they teach you quite a bit of this in ground search and rescue as you're training and learning about what people should do. That way, you guys can recognize what should be done to further assist you in finding people, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah, we do a few things. One of them is lost person's behavior, and it sort of goes to play. And I'm not going to try and explain that too much here, but like a fisherman will tend to do certain things. A child would tend to do other things. People with different affiliations or knowledge will tend to gravitate towards different stuff. And for years, people tended to go downhill when they got lost. Now that's changed with the advent of technology and our ever-present cell phone. We now tend to go uphill when we're lost to see if we can get better signal.
And I suppose
So,
I never really thought of that. That's
yeah.
You're absolutely right. I think about myself. Even when I lose signal, first thing I do is look for a hill.
Hill or maybe a tree to climb. And I'm not suggesting that climbing a tree is a good idea when you're lost. It seems that you've already gotten yourself into one bad situation. You should probably avoid trying to get yourself into a second one. Uh, but sometimes options are limited. I see somebody sneaking into my room.
So I guess starting off, and maybe you correct me as I go along. One of the best things you can do is kind of some preventive maintenance. So if you are going out into the woods, I guess step number one should be let somebody know where you're going and hopefully give them an idea of where you should be and when you should return. Now, that could be as simple as just printing a map off Google Maps. I know you and I have done that when we've gone out in our camping trips.
Oh, yeah.
And I've given copies of those maps to my wife, as well as I've given the estimated GPS coordinates saying, like, we should be here. And if we're not out by Monday by noon or something like that, maybe send somebody to this location and see what's going on.
Yes, for sure. And there's a lot of ways we can do this now. And the beauty is you can email, text your information, so it's easier to find and recover. It's not like, one time you might have called your buddy and said, "Listen, I'm going in here. I'll come out at such and such a time." That was a great method in its time, but the reality is he could forget. He may say, "Oh, Robert knows what he's doing." And he may forget or he may not think about it. Now we can set reminders and all that. And there are even apps. There's one that we push with Search and Rescue, but there are different apps, and I'd have to look where you can do that. You can pre-plan a trip and publish it to people so that they can easier find you. So that's a good method. But that's one thing to do. The other thing really is to know what you're doing and where you're going yourself. Because if you get in and say, make a decision that you're going to, say, Spider Lake, and then get there and you see the parking lot's full and the weather's not as great, and you say, oh, maybe I'll just go down the road and I'll go somewhere else. Your whole plan's gone if you don't let someone know. So if you change your plan, or if you veer off because you didn't really know the trail and you made the wrong decision, that's where it gets really complicated, because you yourself, walking at a brisk pace, you can probably cover close to 7 kilometers in an hour. And that's booting her a bit, but you're not running. When we start a search, we're not searching 7 kilometers away. We're searching, within a couple of kilometers where we last evidence, trying to figure out where you went for sure. It takes a long time to cover, say, a 7 kilometer radius.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I guess another one on that, and I just had it on my notes here because before we veer too far off, I want to get your thoughts on this. What's your thoughts on those spot devices? And basically, there's just a personal GPS that transmit your coordinates to a computer or an app or something like that. I know a buddy of mine used to fly a helicopter with natural resources, and he was big on Heaven One, and he, let his friends in on the wink, and you could watch where he was flying, and it was kind of interesting to watch. And but I assume those were originally made specifically for people going out into the woods that wanted to basically have tabs kept on them. Do you have any experience with those, Ben? Or
I've never personally used one. So with the search and rescue, we have TMR radios and different types of radios that do transmit our location to the head, the base or whatever. So they can track us. Plus, we have a separate GPS unit, standalone device that we carry on with us, and we can read those coordinates off and read them back. But no, the Spot is an awesome device, and I think there are a couple of competitions out with it now. But yeah, I think you can even load them with, say, 5 or 6 predetermined like text messages. So one could be like help now, another one might be send beer. But no, I mean, people do put things on, or I'll be out in an hour, meet me at the rendezvous point. You can set these predetermined texts up on some of these. So it's a good method. There's no doubt about it. And there are some trails that require you carry a similar type device. When this was quite a few years ago, I was in Newfoundland, and we were doing some research on the Grouse Moor trail, which is an awesome bucket list trail of mine. That was one of the requirements. They actually, you kind of, at the time, you had to apply to do it. Tell them when you were doing it. You had to have a plan. They had to see that you kind of knew, and they wanted to see some evidence that you had done similar type hikes in the past, that you weren't just Joe Blow who's never been in the woods before. It's going to do a 7-day trek through the backwoods of Newfoundland, because that, it doesn't really fly. But you had to carry one of these tracking devices, and even that has some limitations depending on the terrain you're in. If you're in the wrong spot, it may not be able to get a decent signal out. But up in the top, the plateaus there, you'd get a solid signal, no doubt. But I question whether when you're down inside the fjords, with all that rock blocking, it may be limited in its capabilities. So you do have to realize everything has its limitations. But a great device, it gives you a lot of options. And if they got to send a plane in for you or something like that, they really do need to know where you're to, right?
and I suppose with one of those, as long as it's getting reception, as you said, that would basically give them a pinpoint location of where the device is anyway. That
Yeah.
being said, if you take the device with you, be sure you're carrying it if you decide to venture off from your campsite, for instance.
Yeah, and some of them are set up, and someone could correct me if I'm wrong here, but a lot of them, I believe, are set up that if you stay still too long, it will send a message, or it'll basically alert someone that it's been 12 hours and this guy hasn't moved. I think something's wrong. So that's something to keep in mind. I believe there's also sat phone systems you can get now that aren't that ridiculous. There are a lot of options you can get that sort of increases your ability to communicate with friends and family and rescue services as needed. Our quite good, and a lot of people that are found simply using their cell phones. They call for help. They ping their phone, and we more or less walk right into them. So that's probably about 90% of Nova Scotia, and I'd say like all of PEI and most of New Brunswick. You can get a cell phone signal within a few kilometers, right?
Mm.
So
And that's a really good point too. And I guess that deserves a little reiteration is the spot device, the sat phones and stuff like that. Those are luxury items. Not everybody can afford them, but if you can, I mean, they're like the gold standard, I guess. But as you said, cell phones, proper planning and communication, these are all basic things that don't cost a lot of money and everybody should be able to do. So I guess that's kind of like your bare minimum, right?
yeah, yeah, for sure. Did you see the article a while ago? It was maybe this is you came up with this idea this week. A young lady got lost in Halifax, and she wrote up a little article. I think it was shared on the bushcrafting site.
No, I didn't see this one.
Oh, so she got lost. I don't know if she's from this area or not. From the looks of her name, I might assume that she isn't. Um, and some of the way she talked in the article, but she mentioned things like they were properly equipped with hiking shoes, and I don't know. For me, that's a bit of an oxymoron. Hiking shoes. Uh, yeah, shoes are for roads and sidewalks and hills. I don't recommend them personally in the woods or in what I would consider a hike. Uh, I'm not just trying to beat them up, but this is obviously someone who went. They had determined to go to one trail. I guess that didn't work out. They tried a different trail, which was more difficult than they had anticipated. They got in there and they got lost, and they called for help, and they more or less they were able to use the cell phone and get to them. But by the time they sort of got help, one of them was soaking wet. The other one had an injured hip. Her hip was really sore, and they were very grateful for the search and rescue and the time it took them. And I think that they still were in there for like over 4 hours. So
And it's and that's just it can literally be that easy. It can be as simple as I think you already said it there at the start of this is your plan changed
yeah,
and everything you prepared for kind of changed along with it, and for lack of a better term you kind of get caught with your pants down. You just something happens you weren't expecting. So we talked a little bit about how to prepare for it, or preemptive measures. So let's talk a little bit about what to do once you realize you're lost. Or I guess leading up to realizing you're lost, one point I wanted to make was the common thing that a lot of people do is they push themselves way further than they need to
oh,
in these situations. Would you not agree? Like it's always that, oh, it must just be over the next hill, or oh, it's just another kilometer ahead, or you know what I mean? There always seems to be that mentality, especially with people that go into the woods, that it's just around the corner. And they just get themselves deeper and deeper and deeper into trouble potentially.
well, and ironically, probably the more knowledgeable you are, the more confident you are in the woods, the less like you are to admit that you're lost. Like if you're already pretty nervous, chances are you've only gone a few feet from the trail and you've already determined you're lost and you're panicking and calling for help. If you're a much more woodsman like person or woodswoman like person, you might actually go a while before you admit to yourself that you're lost. And by then you truly probably are. Um, and that is the problem. Like, so once you even suspect that you may not know where you're to, the instant you're pretty confident that you're not 100% sure where you're to, the best idea is to stop and really think about what you're doing. I mean, we talked about this sort of in our last show. You mentioned uh, navigation technique with the shadows, and you said the big part of it is it gets people to stop and think, and that is invaluable in the point when you're lost. It's we teach it from kids. It's called hugger tree.
Mm.
And the thing is to sort of like stop and stay where you're to, because if you're lost, chances are someone is coming to find you. But if you push on, and what we talked about right at the beginning is if you're pushing and you're panicking, you're probably half running, half walking, trying to get to where you know safety is, and you keep pushing. You can cover 6 kilometers inside of an hour, Uh, quite possibly. Well, that could be 7 kilometers away from the trail, 7 kilometers into the woods. And you probably won't be 7 kilometers straight. Like you're probably going in a big arc, if not a complete circle. So um, it really increases the area that people have to look for you. And it could really be increasing the distance from you being able to find help or your way out. So if you can just stop, take your time, listen. Listen is a huge one. I can never, for especially for me, I find if I stop and just listen, I can usually hear sounds that kind of give away of where I'm to. Sounds of rivers, sounds of people, sounds of roads, things like that. There's usually something that kind of a way out. Uh,
Yeah, and I guess to follow that up is if you do keep pushing, and once you finally admit you are lost, you're probably worn out and you've burnt
yeah,
out most of your day to actually do anything to make your situation a little nicer for the night, if that is going to be your reality. And I mean, that's the big one, is most people don't realize they're lost until it's so close to dusk. uh, they go, oh, I guess I'm spending another night in the woods, and now they have no time to set up any kind of real shelter or fire, or nor do they have the energy. And potentially they burnt up all that energy with very low food supplies, which honestly shouldn't be too much of a problem. Water would be more of a concern. And this is just a number I have in my head. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. Most people are found within 48 or 24 to 72 hours.
yeah, and which really they say you can go 3 days without water. In that time, you're not going to die of thirst. It's highly unlikely. You may get weak. You may be dizzy from low sugar or whatever. I mean, I'm not saying you're going to be perfectly healthy, but it's not an immediate health risk in the first day or even two. Um, but most people don't prepare. Like you're not prepared when you go out for say a day hike. You're not prepared to be out overnight. If you go out for a couple day overnight trip, you probably only had enough food for the trip you're taking. You probably didn't take spare food. You probably didn't take a lot of spare water. I mean, me and you, we both take a filter system now, so chances are we can make our water. A lot of our listeners, I'm sure, do have some kind of water purification system or water boiling system. So water probably won't be a big part of our problem, anyways, when we go. But even like your day trips, just going in, testing out your backpack, or just testing out a small piece of thing. You should always probably, when you go in, plan on staying probably at least 24 hours. Like pack as if you're going to go for at least a day. If you're going for a day, pack for two. Always plan that extra day in anything you do. That's how I try to do it. I always have that extra thing. When we did our trips, we always had more than enough food for
We
our
ate
trip.
good. That's true. We ate good. And I
we were,
think we said this at the one of our really first episodes. We were talking something similar, and as you said, you always threw at least an extra 24 hours worth of food in there. And if I step into the woods, much like you said there, I think I showed it on one of the episodes, and I can't remember. Maybe it was Trail Foods. I have that vacuum sealed pack that I make up every spring, which just has some basic rice, some basic oatmeal, maybe some crackers or something like that, and I vacuum seal it, and I just throw it at the bottom of the bag, and I don't even include that in my normal outing equipment. It weighs, I think it's a pound when it's all said and down, or a pound and a half. It's not much, but it's enough food to actually do if you ration it. Like 3 days, I think I figured it out because it's like a cup and a half of rice. So if you eat a half a cup of rice a day and a cup and a half of oatmeal, you eat a half a cup of oatmeal a day. That's 2 meals. That's breakfast and let's say lunch, right?
yeah.
And as you said, I always have the water filter system with me, and I generally always have my GI cup or something I can boil a little water up into. That's 3 days worth of food. I know I'm not going to starve, so I'm not even going to be. I might be snackish by the time I'm found, but I won't be hungry.
No. Uh, yeah, and I think that's a very powerful thing. Like if you have if you know you have the supplies, the equipment, the knowledge to last a couple of days, then your panic will never be quite as bad. But if you went unprepared and then you did feel your loss, I think the panic would be so much worse. like me and you, I think generally if we went in for an afternoon and then realized we really don't remember which way is out, um, we're probably not going to panic. We're going to be, okay, I guess this is going to be a bit longer than normal. And we would start prepping to spend the night and figure things out in the morning. Um, and I hope our viewers would all do the same. Like once you kind of realize you're lost, don't panic, slow down, take your time, maybe prep to see if maybe you are going to be stuck for the night. At least prep so you are okay. And then, like I said, while you're doing that, you listen, you think things through. There's a good chance you'll realize that you're probably not that lost and that the trail really is just over there. That now you've taken some time to realize, well, I can see something that I seen when I was walking, and I know that's next to the trail, or, you know, it can be that easy, that simple, believe it or not. Uh, but yeah, if you panic and start, just pushing it through the woods, just pushing yourself through, eventually nothing will look familiar and you're really going to be a ways out there. The other thing is to prevent yourself from getting injured. So again, by slowing down and not panicking, you're less likely to twist an ankle, break an arm, break a leg, uh, knock yourself out by falling down something, hitting your head or whatever. Like all these things, I mean, it sounds like I'm getting a little ridiculous here. Falling in a river, and these are all things that make a bad situation into a horrible situation. Uh,
And they're all things that have happened to people that have been lost.
oh yeah, yes. In fact, the falling in a river is extremely common. It's happened to me. It's probably happened to you, right? Like, and the thing is, lost people have been known to do really silly things. As in, we've had lost people cross roads.
Yeah, I mean, desperation kind of clouds your judgment. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But if you were lost and you came to a road, like you're no longer lost. You're now on a road. Like you don't know which road it is. You may not know where the road goes. But I tell you, do not leave that road. Like if you're lost and you found a road, stay there. Like somebody's coming down that road eventually. You're gonna get help. But no, people get panicked. They stop thinking, and all of a sudden they go. Like they're just like, I know helps. Just right that direction, and they'll beeline it, and they'll walk past power lines. They'll walk past roads. They'll walk across rivers that they never crossed to get there in the first place. Like they will do things, and it's like all these are landmarks that you probably should stop and think about because a power line leads to something every time. A road leads to something every time. A river leads to something. It may not be where you want to be, but it'll bring you to a lake, bring you to a water system. Eventually, you're going to find a house, a cabin, a community, the ocean, something that's usable.
I'm just
You get any
answering a comment here.
okay.
Yeah, Care was asking if you mentioned the acronym STOP, Stop, Think, Observe, and Plan. And we did kind of touch on it a little bit with the Hug a Tree thing that you were saying that you taught kids, and we did much the same at Natural Resources at the Education Center. The
Yeah.
whole Hug a Tree mentality, which is not just for kids. So we're kind of walking, anybody that's really tuned in right now, is we're kind of walking through the steps of getting lost, if you will. So we did preventative, make sure somebody knows where you're going or can track you when you're going. Then we did the realize you're lost and don't push yourself, which is kind of where we're at now. Is as soon as you have the inkling you're lost, stop, think it out, take a second, catch your breath, listen, and actually decide if you are lost. And if you are lost, don't run yourself ragged and burn up all your energy so that you're no good once nightfall happens to come. And kind of with that, as you're walking along and you're still kind of like, oh, I don't think I'm lost, maybe I'm lost, as Ben mentioned, trees, or not trees, roads, rivers, power lines, stuff like that, they all usually lead somewhere. And at the very minimum, even if they don't lead somewhere, they're open spaces. You can be easier seen from the air in these open spaces. So if you come to these things, don't just cross them and keep going. Because bare minimum, you're in an open spot now where if a helicopter goes across, and Ground Search and Rescue does use helicopters, they can see you. It's way easier to see you open in an open area than hidden under a bunch of shrubbage. How many times have people been found and they said, oh, I could hear the helicopter going overhead, but I just couldn't get a signal to them?
Yeah, it happens. Um, and you mentioned, signals. I mean, this is a big thing. So if you are lost, marking things, I often recommend carrying the marking tape and and a black pen. And I've said this before. You take your marking tape, put your name, your date, time, especially if you're going in and coming back out the same route. You pull them off as you come back. But if you do something like that, you just mark your path. A, it's easier for you to find your own way out. And B, if as a search and rescuer, if I'm coming in later looking for you and I see a bright orange piece of tape with your name wrote on it, I'm
And a
going to stop.
time?
At
At least
time,
then you know exactly when you were at that spot.
I'm going to call that into base and say, listen, Robert left a piece of tape on this tree at 7:52. Like this means something, I think. And they're going to mark it. They're going to put it on the GPS. We're going to say, okay, if I look 100 feet down the road, I see another one. I'll just start following that. I will probably leave my tasking. I'm going to follow
Well,
these
that at
bright
least gives you a direction. You know what I mean? So,
and and we're going to probably find Robert. But if Robert goes in the woods and doesn't leave any marks and tries to be as stealthy, he's basically stealth camping now. It could take us days to find him. But if he's marking his trail, we're probably going to find him pretty quickly. Uh, so, I mean, a lot of people seem to look. I mentioned this, and they sort of give me like the stink eye, and oh, that's pollution, or this, that, and the other
it's
thing.
only pollution if you don't clean it up.
There are biodegradable ones you can get that only lasts for a couple of weeks, and they start to go apart if that's what you
I was going to
prefer.
say, I think that's what I actually got in the bottom of my bag's biodegradable one.
Yeah, they're less visible, honestly. Like
Yeah,
the
mine's
high vis,
green, which is horrible in the woods.
the high vis bright orange plastic ones. They're quite visible with a flashlight all day long and all night long.
Mm.
Have the biodegradable ones. At night, honestly, they're almost invisible, and during the day, they shine up pretty good. But even in the fall, when the leaves are turning orange and red, they blur in pretty good in the wrong situation. But it's still way better than nothing. Like, don't get me wrong. We used to blaze trees. We used to take the bark off the side of a tree.
Yep.
Yeah, you for that. But if you're lost and you have to mark yourself, do it. Blaze a tree, put it in a cross, like take the piece you cook off and just jam it into sideways so it makes a big X.
Anything to be noticed at that point. And I guess let's keep trucking right along, I guess, because we are at about the 30-minute mark and there's still a little bit to cover. So we covered the preventative. We covered recognize when you are lost. Don't burn up your energy. Mark your trail as you're going in. Mark any way you can once you realize you're lost. And then I guess from there, it's kind of prepare for the long haul, so to speak. It's once again, we said earlier, it's usually between 24 72 hours. Most people are found. But by the long haul, I mean, if you think you're going to have to spend the night, you might as well start getting ready for it now while you have the time to do so. Think about the weather that you're in. Is it clear? Is it hot? Is it sunny? Is it kind of rainy? Is it cold? What are you going to need to comfortably spend the night, or as comfortably as you can spend the night? What do you got with you? Like, it's really the time to sit down, make an assessment of what you got and what you need to do to get yourself through the night. And along with those lines is to become as visible as you can to anybody that's looking for you. So potentially signaling devices, if you have a whistle or something like that, make sure you know where it's at.
Yeah,
Maybe building a fire, maybe getting to an open area, or setting up in an open area where you're easily going to be seen. And you can correct me on this again, Ben. It's groups of three. Anything in three is generally the signal of distress. So 3 whistle blows, 3 stacks of rocks if you have nothing else, 3 little fires. Generally, if they're looking for somebody, they're going to investigate any fire. But I mean, if you're on a
yeah.
stranded island or something like that, 3 fires, 3 of something is the universal signal of distress. So keep that in mind too. So now, not only should you start thinking about how you're going to make it through the night. Now, this means if you have a sleeping bag, great. You already have a way to keep warm. Do you need to build a shelter? Do you have a tarp that you can use to cover over? And I wouldn't put a whole lot of time and energy into making luxury shelters. This is going to be one of those things you are just kind of trying to keep dry, trying to keep warm. Focus
Yeah.
on getting the fire going a little bit more because people are going to see that from a distance. They're going to see the smoke. They're going to smell the smoke. It's going to be seen from the air. And some sort of basic shelter to keep the elements off you and the heat in and around you. Would that be safe to say, Ben?
Yeah. So yeah, when if you have to overnight it, shelter is great. Everyone thinks shelter's a big thing. If it's not raining, honestly, you can lose as much heat through the ground as you would through the air above you. So getting yourself a amount of bedding, some boughs down or something would be a great idea. Get something that's, insulate yourself from the ground, insulate yourself from the air above you, and then get a shelter over the top of you, and you'll be quite comfortable. If you got a fire going, I didn't do this one search, but one our search and rescue president loves to tell the story. They were in for hunting for a hunter one time, and I guess the hunter was 60s, 70s maybe. So they got the call. They were very worried about him. He was rabbit hunting or something. So they went in. They think they started searching for him around 6 o'clock, and they found him around 9 o'clock at night, I think. It was pretty dark, and he had his little fire going. He had a little shelter set up, and he was prepared for the night. And this guy Gilbert, he said when he got there, he's like, I want to spend the night there. He said, I just thought, maybe I could just pull up and sit down next to him, sit there, go through the night. We could walk out the next morning. It was just such a cozy little camp he had set himself up for. And he was quite, calm and relaxed. He had taken the time to build him a little shelter. He realized that it was getting late. He wasn't going to make it out in time, so he was just going to settle in, and he was get out in the morning. Of course, his wife said, it came dark and he wasn't home. She called for help, and she did the right thing. He did the right thing, and really, I don't think the man stressed because he did everything right. He was prepared. He set up a decent shelter, and he was ready for it. And we found him in no time. If you do differently, though, if you decide I want to find my own way out, you keep pushing yourself. Your risk of injury goes way up. The risk of you being lost to the point where it takes longer for us to find you, like every hour you walk, could be another day before we find you.
Yeah,
Uh,
potentially, I suppose, because we already covered. You can cover a lot of distance when panicked.
Yeah, and we're going to, like I said, we're going to start searching where we think you're most likely to be, and we're relatively close, and then we're going to look for signs. And if we have signs that says, it really looks like he was over here, we found his backpack with his hat in it, we know for sure that's him. Then perfect. Well, we kind of know the route you were going. Now we're going to search around that area, looking for the next hint, the next clue of where you went, because you may have gone in a straight line, or you may have turned off 90. Maybe you dropped the path and went to a fishing hole you knew about. So we don't know what you're doing 100%. We have to search what we suspect and what we know. So if your friends tell us that he normally fishes at this fishing hole, we'll go there. If there's no sign of you there, then we're going to try and look for you between where you left and where we thought you were going. We don't find you there. Now we're going to branch out. We're going to look for other avenues. But this all takes time. So the more you move around, the longer it's going to take us to locate you as a search and rescue group. And it gets to the point where you go 2-3 days and we don't find any sign or any hints of where you're to. Uh, there's a good likelihood your search will be called off. I'm not saying that anyone wants to give up. I still think of searches I did years ago and still want to go in and see if I can find people that we didn't find. But yeah, the more sign you leave, the more marks that the longer we're going to look, and the further we will look for you. But it really does help to stay where you're to, settle in, and make your presence known. Like, so when you're setting up a camp, take your time, mark the area around the camp fairly big. That means the likelihood of two or three guys going by and missing your little uh, impromptu debris shelter. You can almost walk on a debris shelter and not see it.
Yeah,
Right?
if anybody frequents some of the pages that Ben and I do, I'm trying to think where it was. It might have been the Hammock Camping Group, or it might have been Nova Scotia Bushcraft. I can't remember. Somebody put up a natural debris shelter, and literally from one side you couldn't see it. Unless
Yeah.
you were looking straight into it, you could not see this thing.
Yeah, a properly made. And honestly, a lot of our camping gear, like a lot of my gear is camouflage. Not that I've purchased it. Like I would just as gladly buy bright orange, trust me, but sometimes the best gear that you can find at the price you're willing to pay is camo. So I'm not saying camo is perfect in its what it calls itself as camouflage, but it does make a huge difference. Uh, and if your there's are say a couple hundred yards away and they're looking in the woods and you have a camouflage hammock or a camouflage tent, good chance we may not notice it.
Even green by its own is even hard to see. I mean, look at my hammock versus my sleeping bag, for instance. That bright orange sleeping bag that stuck out for a long ways when we were out at the lake, but the
Yeah.
hammock, like you wouldn't really notice the hammock except for the little orange bubbling out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's that's a good point. Like when you walk away from your site, we knew where we left our hammocks, but every time, like every 10 feet you move back, it becomes a little less easy to see. When you're 10 feet away, it's pretty there. You know, it's right there. You're 20 feet away, it's a little harder. 30 feet away, it's a little harder. 40 and 50 feet, you barely see it. Like honestly, that close. Sometimes you can't if you're not looking for it, if you don't know what to look for. Some of the stuff can be easily missed. We train to see the little things. Like we train looking for bread tags. That's one of the tools we use to train. But uh, especially if it's not designed to be seen, right? Having a flashlight. You mentioned a whistle. A whistle and a flashlight, invaluable. Your voice can wear out, especially if you're lost, hydrated. Obviously, you won't be able to call out, but you can probably blow a whistle or flash a flashlight or use a mirror. These are all good methods to sort of signal people.
And nope, had a thought and I lost it. Just like that, boop, gone. Anyway, yeah. And as I mentioned a little bit before, groups of three. Big thing is groups of three is the universal sign of distress. So now that you've made your pre-plan, you realized you're lost, you hunkered in for the night, you already have the basics of a great rescue coming to you. Somebody knows where you should have been, so they're sending you to the location. You
Yeah.
recognize that things didn't go the way you thought, so instead of moving away from that location where you plan to be, or potentially moving away from that location where you meant to be, you're staying put, and you hunkered in to get yourself some good rest, a little bit of comfort. Because I mean, if you run yourself completely ragged, and you end up crashing under a tree in a sleeping bag, that wears on you. It's a mental game at that point. So you have a little bit of comforts. And Ben mentioned it a couple times, but to say it straight out loud, don't move once you decide to hunker down. Once you wake up in the morning, you start looking around, you go, oh my God, I bet you it's just a couple feet over that way. Well, you're no better off than you were the night before, unless you know with relative certainty that, oh, I recognize that now, that's where I should be.
Yeah.
It's probably not worth taking the chance, in all honesty. If you're like, I think it's over there, just stay put. Stay put and work on making yourself visible and making marks and stuff like that. Because once again, if you're wrong, you're potentially moving away from that search area again, as Ben had said, and now you just potentially added on another day to them finding you. And you potentially added on a bunch more risks for rolling an ankle or falling down a ravine, or not, well, maybe not a ravine, but falling down something you didn't see or into a river, or you just trip. I mean, a buddy of mine that worked, and I always go back to natural resources, but that's where all my stories come from. A buddy of mine worked at natural resources. He was in the woods, just doing something. He was just off the road a little bit, and you know how they go along with those bush hogs and they trim out the ditches. Well, anyway, he was
Yeah.
into the woods and he was coming back out and he was just going back up to the truck and he just stumbled and he hit the ground. A stick went in and punctured his eardrum. He is now permanently deaf on one side of his ear. And that was just something simple. Like he's seen his truck. And this is a guy that's good in the woods and stuff like that. Like it was just a fluke happened like that and now he's completely deaf in that side of his head for the rest of his life. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy for, like we say, stupid things, but it's easy for devastating things to happen really quickly.
Yeah.
So, if you're wandering around, you're just increasing that potential, especially if you're lost.
Now, if you do wake up the next morning, you have a whole day that you could potentially be stuck there. There's what you can do. And one of them is a method. We've talked about this before. You mark your camp, mark it well, and then walk like 100 feet in a north direction. Great if you got a compass. I mean, that would make a lot of sense. But if you don't, use your best method for locating a direction, and you go 100 feet north, 100 back to your base, 100 feet, and then try 100 feet south, and then do east, and then do west. And if you don't find anything that's obviously, then you can try 200.
Uh-oh. Seems like we might have lost Ben there. I don't think that was on my end for once. I bet you he's going to send me a text message. But anyway, what Ben was saying there was, yeah, you walk in a direction and you do the 100 feet and then you come back to your base and you mark out that 100 feet when you're out there. Put some sort of marking up. And if you don't find anything in either of the four directions, then you can try going out a little further from that point. Still taking a bearing, still doing a straight line walk. Oh, there comes Benny back. See if I can get him back on here with us. Welcome back, Ben. How did that go, buddy?
Wow.
Let's see if we can get you back up here on the on the where are you at? Okay. Turn off your picture, turn back on your webcam. There we go, you're back. So anyway, you were saying you walk straight out in a direction, 100 feet, come back, try all four directions. That didn't work. Now potentially you could try, start at your first direction, maybe go out another 100 feet from that. Like you mark your spot, you go out 100 feet. This is potentially you have a good bearing on which direction you want to go. If you're finding you don't have the best bearings, check out last week's episode about navigating potentially without a compass. We do give some indications there on some things you can do to try and get yourself some basic cardinal directions.
But there's a lot of things you can do even if you don't have good directions. Take some sticks, stick in the ground. Every 4 or 5 steps, stick another stick in the ground. Keep doing it. I mean, it's going to take you some time, but right now you got a whole day with nothing else planned but wait until you get bounced. Take your time and mark a little trail, and you mark your 100 feet and just keep doing that. What you're doing is you're building a bigger and bigger circle that you've identified the way to the center, which is your base, where you have a place to sleep. It's where you potentially have a fire running. Maybe you keep that fire going. So you never go so far that you're gonna, your fire's gonna go out while you're gone, but you just reach it, keep going out until you find something. And really, like I would hope that you wouldn't get too far, before you've done maybe say 1,000 feet, basically, before you probably would come across the trail. If you stopped in a reasonable time frame when you got lost, when you realized you were lost, then it shouldn't take you that long. Now, if you had just kept pushing on, this could be a very big distance. If you were in the middle of Tangiers or the Tobiatic, or trying to think of another big wilderness area here in Nova Scotia.
But, let's go to the extreme. Let's go to like the forests of Ontario, where you could literally go hundreds of kilometers without hitting anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my hometown, you could, if you went the wrong direction, you could go probably a couple 100 kilometers before you hit anything.
And a big thing about doing what you were just talking about there, Ben, is it keeps your mind occupied, and it's doing something to better your situation, which keeps that anxiety, keeps that fear, keeps all that stuff down a little bit, because you are actively doing something to help your situation. However, you have to keep in mind that little camp you set up is now kind of your anchor point, and until something becomes better than that, you have to keep that your anchor point, because chances are somebody's going to stumble across that before they stumble across you in the woods. They're going to notice the smoke from your fire, hopefully, or your shelter, or hopefully your tarp you have a big orange tarp that's just splayed out, or something like that. You know what I mean? That's going to be your base of operations, so to speak.
Yeah, and here's where that emergency blanket makes it's worth its weight in gold. And I say that a bit of a joke because it weighs virtually nothing. It's as shiny as hell. and it can help conserve the heat that you're producing. So during the day when you're sort of that thing as your tarp out, and people can see that from a helicopter, they can see that from almost a mile away. Like it's like a giant ball of tinfoil. You know what I mean? Like
Oh no, it's true. It's 100% true.
it's super visible. So when you go into woods, do like I do highly recommend a little survival kit. Doesn't have to be very big. You mentioned, your food, your ability to get some water and some shelter. I mean, one of the best things is one of those little survival blankets. Soul makes one that's bright orange on one side and silver on the other side.
Mm.
Uh, it's two wonderful colors in the woods to help get you out. And if you go to, like you say, if you have a bit of an open area, when a helicopter passes over top and you got this bright orange square or bright silver square, they can't help but notice that. They're going to stop. They're going to investigate, and they're going to find you.
And I guess
So,
that's another good thing to point out is when helicopters are potentially looking for somebody in the woods, they're not generally flying at the max of their height. They usually try to come down over the tree canopy a little bit so they can view down in it. So if you are in a little bit of an open area and you are flashing around something like that, that's why it's going to be so easily visible. They're not going to be, 1,000, 2,000 feet above you. They're going to be as low as they can safely go while still trying to monitor for you.
I mean, a 4 square meter survival tarp is way more visible than your 6-inch stocking cap,
By far. And that's
right?
just simple math. I mean, more area coverage is going to be easier to see at a distance.
So if you're wandering through the woods with your little stocking cap on and your camouflage jacket and your camouflage pants and you're walking along, it's quite easy for that thing to get blocked by a branch or something and the guy fly right over you. But you got a nice big square marked out. They're going to pick up on that even easier. I mean, do everything you can to increase your chances, and I think it won't take you long to be found and a lot safer.
And truth be told, that was one of the big reasons I got an orange sleeping bag. Because my tarp is black, terrible for in the woods, especially if you're under a canopy, it's not going to be seen. But during the day, if for some reason I got lost at night, I'm going to be asleep in it. Or huddled up in it, whichever way it happens to work out. But during the day, I'm going to unzip it and probably throw it over something to let it air out anyway, in case I got to spend, night two. Got to conserve the heat, as we know. You should let your sleeping bag air out so you get rid of all that moisture. It's now weighed out and is taking up a larger area to hopefully potentially be seen from either the sky or off in the woods or something.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree 100%. So no, those are things. So like you said, we've captured being prepared. So letting people know where you're going, carrying the right amount of gear, like some extra gear, extra food, ability to have your fire and all that. It's a basic kit. 24-hour kit is a great thing to have over and above whatever you were planning on doing. Um, and really, a 24-hour kit can easily become a 48 or 72-hour kit. Like the real difference between the 24-hour kit and the 72-hour kit is the food you carry in it. Would you not agree there, Robert?
100%. I completely agree. Sorry, I was just answering another
Oh,
little
yeah.
thing there on my phone, but no, absolutely. And I mean, that's once again, the big thing is it gives you comfort. And I can't stress enough how much being calm and comforted in a situation like that can go just to make it a better situation. Um, and like I said it earlier, and I'm going to reiterate it now because it's important, is if you stay calm, and to help you stay calm, it's having things like the food and something to do and state of mind. And uh, I'm not going to name drop, but there's a survivalist out there that always takes a harmonica simply to keep his mind busy while he's out. You know who I'm talking about, don't you, Ben? So
Yep.
anyway, I don't want to get into any kind of legal stuff like that. I don't know if I don't think we're famous enough to rub heels with him. But anyway, if you have something to keep your mind
Yeah.
busy, it keeps stress away. It keeps you calm. It keeps you centered, and that's a big thing. Like being lost in the woods can be scary, for lack of a better term, if you are not in the right state of mind. If you're panicked and and your anxiety's up, and stress is, of course, going to be up regardless of the rest of your state of mind, it gets scary and dangerous. And you got to try and keep that under wraps as best you can. And that's what a lot of what we just talked about will help you do. Being prepared going in is that feeling of, oh, crap, I'm lost, but you know what? I have something that's going to help me. That's a big thing. Oh, crap, I'm lost, but you know what? I got a little bit of food. I'm not going to starve because for whatever reason, as soon as somebody's lost, they wonder what they're going to eat. Don't know why. It's just, even me, I've gotten turned around like just a little bit and been like, oh man, I'm hungry. You're just, it's not important, but psychologically it's important. You know what I mean? And then water, same thing. If you have a filter system, you know what? I might be lost, but I'm not going to die of thirst.
Yeah.
So, and realistically, you probably wouldn't, as Ben said, but these are all little psychological tools that'll help keep you centered, calm, and focused. And that's really what's going to help you, because we've said it a couple times now, panic people tend to just beeline. And when you beeline, you're just getting further and further away from help.
Yeah. Like I said, the sad thing is they become so single-minded that they pass things that are obviously going to help. They talk to these guys later, and they don't remember seeing a road. They don't remember seeing the things they passed through that were obviously going to help them because they were so focused on the one thing they thought they needed that they ignored everything else around them. So yeah, that's a big thing, the psychology of it. I think if you can avoid the panic, it won't take long for your logical brain to figure out how to get out of there. But you do have to sort of get out of your own way for a second and make sure you're calm. And if you can do all this, if you can stay calm, you can set up a camp, there's a good chance when you get found, you're going to be more disappointed in the fact that you set up a nice camp, you got a great campfire going, and now someone's dragging you out because you're lost.
No, come get me tomorrow.
And this has happened. Like we found people. They're like, no, man, I'm good.
But you know what? It's better that happen than it not happen. On both sides of it. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, we find people like that. They're heroes, right? Like, yeah, this guy had it going, right? We're a little jealous, really. But when you find people that are panicked and stuff, like you really feel bad for them and stuff, and you understand where they came from because all of a sudden you don't know how to get out. You had that appointment that you had to make the next day, or you had to go to work, or you had to get the kids from the sitters, or whatever it was. Like you start to really get into your own head, and you make poor decisions when you're tired, you're scared, you're wet. You make really poor decisions. So it's really important to stop, think about what you're doing, and make sure what you're doing is the right thing. Personally, I always plan for that whole extra day. Regardless of the trip I'm doing, I'm always prepared to do an extra day. Now, that might not mean I have the day off of work or that I'm planning on having someone watch the kids for an extra day, but I make sure that they know that there's a chance that something goes wrong. I may not be able to make it out. You may be stuck with the kids the next day, or that work, like I have a sick day or something more or less arranged so that if I don't show up, it was because something went wrong and I can't get out, and people won't panic as much. I mean, I still hope they're coming to look for me because if I'm not out at the time and place I say I am, it's almost 100% that something went wrong.
And there's a good point, I guess, you made in there. It's you may not necessarily be lost. Something may have happened that you just can't get out.
Yeah.
Though I've been fortunate and it's never happened to me to this extreme, I have heard of people like driving into a camp or something like that to where they're going to set up and go tenting. They turn around and come back out and heavy rains have set in or something and wash the road out. They literally just can't get through it at that time. They're better off holding tight, letting things settle down a little, and looking at it when it's a little nicer out to see if they can pick their way through. And that could just be, that 24-hour kit might just help you there. Like myself, even if I go hunting for the day, rabbits, birds, whatever the case may be, I always carry a small backpack with the basics to get me through 24 hours. Much like Ben said, doesn't matter if I'm going out camping or just for a walk in the woods. You never know what could happen.
No.
Now, one little thing I want to say, Ben, and I want to know if you heard this story or not, because it's one that I've heard from the local ground search and rescue, and I'm sure you've probably worked with the Pictou County Ground Search and Rescue before at some point. And has this story ever made it to you? Fella's gone into the woods, done everything wrong, didn't tell anyone where he was going, nobody knew, nothing like that, got turned around, got lost. Started wandering through the woods. Eventually came to a power line. I don't condone this, but the way he got help to him was he set one of the power poles on fire. And when they came to repair the line, he was basically sitting there going, all right, boys, show me how to get out.
I think I have heard that story before. It may have been actually from you and not the search and rescue. I do know the Pictou search and rescue crew. I do know some of the guys. I talk to them somewhat regularly. So yes, but no, I mean, it's a method. It's
I'm trying to discern if it's an urban legend or if there's some truth to it, honestly, because I mean, in its essence, it's brilliant. Once again, I don't condone burning down power lines at all for any way, shape, or form. But you know what? The individual in the story did what they had to.
Yeah. It's a method. Again, like I said, we can't condone that. If he made it to a power line, he could have followed the power line. He would have got somewhere. Either he's going to end up at the source or the destination. But no power line that I'm aware of goes nowhere.
The only one that I would hesitate to say that to would be high vol lines, because they can go for kilometers before getting anywhere. But high vol lines you're not going to burn down anyway. They're all steel.
Yeah. You're right. They could go kilometers, and they may go parallel to a road for kilometers. But if you're walking along one and it's going parallel to a road, it probably won't be too long. I mean, like they go over hills. There's clearings and stuff. You'll have opportunities, but it's basically a highway through the woods, and it is going somewhere, and it's a guarantee. Another direction might actually be the shorter direction out, but it's not a guaranteed direction. The power line is a guaranteed direction. If you follow that long enough, you're going to get the help. It may be a harder trail at times, but generally they can get like ATVs and stuff up and down those trails, so they're not that bad. They got excavators and they got equipment into it to bring the poles in there at one point, so you should be able to walk it.
And we do have the advantage in Nova Scotia that we're a relatively small province. You're not going to get that hundreds and hundreds of kilometers in one direction without hitting anything. In Nova Scotia, you're going to be lucky to go 14 to 20 kilometers in a single direction without hitting a river, a road, a residential power line, or something like that.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But that being said, it's very easy to get turned around in the woods too and walk in circles. So if you're on a power line, that's why we're saying it's probably safe to follow it in Nova Scotia. If you're in the middle of the woods, it may not be so good to try and pick a direction and keep going, because it is very easy to get turned around.
Wind is one that has nearly stranded me before. I mean, you know me, I'm very partial to watercraft, canoes and kayaks and stuff. I've made inquiries about new kayaks already this year because I have an addiction.
A buddy of mine just picked one up from Crappy Tire. Clearance, $300 off or something like that. It was just ridiculous.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. But I've been in lakes, and when you wake up in the morning and the wind's high and you're looking out there and the waves are 2-3 feet high, and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to get out today. Like, sometimes it's better off just to hunker down and spend that extra day. And yeah, technically you're not lost, but you're also not getting it out.
No,
and
you're technically stranded.
You're stranded. And if you don't have communication, nobody knows that you're just stranded and that you're still going to make it out. Just could be a couple hours or a day or two later. And that extra pack means you're not panicking. And if you've done the prep beforehand, help is going to come if you're not out within a reasonable time frame. But again, the absolute best thing there again is to settle down until you can safely move ahead in a good manner. So yeah, hunker down, wait it out. Somebody will either come or the weather will clear up and you can get out the way you're supposed to. Just not in the time you were supposed to. It's not the end of the world. But pushing yourself out over rough and windy weather in a small boat, just ask Jeremy what that's like, and he'll tell you.
Poor
Me,
Jeremy. We're
Jeremy,
still picking on him.
no, but me, Jeremy, and Gary, we went out one day. We were going camping. We were pretty determined. We showed up. I mean, Gary had his battleship, the big 14-foot sit on top kayak with a throne on it. And, me and
Mm.
Jeremy had two little Pelicans. I had a 10-foot, and he had an 8-foot. And we got out there. Once we passed the first little row of islands and stuff, we were outside of the sheltered cove. The waves got quite heavy, and it was, the odd one was splashing over, and it was a lot of fun and exciting, and we had, pretty laid down kayaks. And next thing I know, Jeremy's running for the shore, and I pull around the next sheltered cove, and I'm waiting there for him to come around. He doesn't come around for the longest time. We had to go in looking for him, and we made the call. I think we made the right call. Let's stay here. Let's not keep pushing on in this bad weather. I mean, that was our first day. It wasn't our second day, but that could have easily happened on our second day. Could have been in there, and the second day just wasn't worth trying to push our way through. Uh, so we sheltered where we landed, and that's the thing. We didn't shelter where we told anyone we were to. We were told everyone we were going to go further into the lake. We sheltered about halfway where we were planning on going, but we were safe and secure, and we had each other at that night. So we all knew where we were to, and I think that added a large amount of comfort to our loved ones at home, knowing that we weren't individually out there by ourselves in bad weather. Um, and I think cell phones still work, so I think we just called home and told everyone that we were safe. So yeah, take advantage of that too. When you're in the woods, if you do get a chance, you do have your cell phone. Sometimes especially most of the trip, I'll turn it on occasionally. I just send a message letting everyone know that I'm fine. If you can do that,
Yeah, I was gonna say just a text message sometimes is all you need, right?
yeah,
Just be like, oh, things didn't work out right. We ended up staying a little closer, or we didn't get as far in as we expected. You know what I mean? That way, if something does progress beyond that, they at least know you didn't make it to that point.
yeah. Or they have a new point last known.
Yeah.
You know, so if any time you've made changes, especially if you can't let someone know right away because you have no signal, when you do, let someone know that it's changed, the plan has changed, location, whatever. If you're deviating, did I freeze up there?
Yeah, a little bit. Ever since you cut out there, you've had little spots, but it hasn't been too bad.
I was gonna say, if you are going in, say you're going into a trail and you get to a decision point and you make a decision different than what your plan was, if you could leave some kind of note or direction at that point of the decision, that can save yourself a lot of trouble. And it could be as little easy as that you have that write and rain uh, paper and pen.
Mm.
One of those. Just take a little notepad, just write down. Ben was here, such and such a time. Going forward, the river was too high, couldn't make pass. Went over here. Just pin it to a tree. I'm not saying anyone's ever going to find it, but if they did, at a decision point, it might help someone find you a lot quicker if it comes to that. So if nothing else, something like that would work. And I do keep one of those. I always keep a little notepad and paper in my kit in case I have to do something like that. Or
I got the pen, I don't get the paper. I gotta buy the paper.
well, there's birch trees.
Yeah, that's generally it. I usually find something that'll work. But
Yeah. Uh, just 100% every time going to work, but it's something you can do because there's no foolproof plan.
no, nope. The only foolproof plan is not to go at all, and that's no fun.
That is a fool's plan for sure.
I think we covered quite a bit of everything there, Ben. Was
Yeah.
there anything, like I said, this is kind of your area of expertise, so is there anything that we missed you think should be added into that, or?
No, I think like we said, pre-plan, prepare yourself. sort of stick to your plan as best as possible, and if you have to deviate, do your best to make that change visible, and don't panic. Once you realize that things have gone astray, you don't know where you're to, plan has stop and assess your situation and prepare for the worst. Try not to make it worse by necessarily going in a direction that you're not 100% confident in, because it just opens up the risks and lengthens the time it's going to take us to find you.
What's the old saying? Prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah.
So.
Like we were, Kara said there, stop, think, observe, and plan. If you take the time to do that, I think most times you'll come out of a situation in pretty good shape.
No, I completely agree, and yeah, that's pretty much all I can come up with. Um, it's one of those things. It is a risk, but with a little bit of planning and hopefully some of the stuff we talked about here for you tonight, you mediate that risk and you lower that to an acceptable risk. So, as always, we hope nobody actually needs this information. Well, not as always. For this show specifically, we hope nobody actually needs this information. But if you do find yourself in that situation, hopefully we have given you a few tools in the old utility belt that'll help you through that time.
I picture you dressed up like Batman running through the woods.
Bushcraft man. Bushcraft man. But yeah. Anyway, on that note, I think I'm done for the night before I get too goofy.
Cabin hot, coming here, buddy. You haven't slept in 2 days, have you?
No, not at all. All right, everybody, that's it for me. Thanks for joining us. Like I said, hopefully this helped you out, and hopefully we'll see you all again next week.
Yeah.
Somebody just joined in. Sorry, man. You just caught the end of the show. Sony Heel, Soneheel. Hello, and goodbye. Night, everyone.
Night.